The Grand Hall of the Zyrexian Empire was unlike anything Captain Elias Voss had ever seen. It stretched beyond human imagination, with golden pillars reaching so high they disappeared into a misty ceiling. Strange blue flames hovered in the air, casting an eerie glow over the crowd. Hundreds of alien nobles, warriors, and diplomats stood in attendance, their colorful robes and armored suits reflecting the light like a sea of shifting colors. Elias took a slow breath, steadying himself. This is it. Humanity's future depends on me. At the center of the hall, the Zyrexian Empress sat on an enormous black throne, her piercing silver eyes locked onto Elias. She was massive, nearly 10 feet tall, her 4 muscular arms resting on the throne's armrests like coiled steel. She was a ruler feared across the stars. To her right stood her daughter, Princess Silara. She was a warrior, a legend, and an impossible match for any human, standing over 8 feet tall. Her deep violet skin shimmered under the hall's glow. Sharp, curved horns framed her face, and her golden eyes burned with the intensity of a star. She wore dark armor, each plate etched with symbols of past victories. Every Zyrexian in the room knew her as the strongest of their kind. And yet, when Elias pointed at her and spoke the words that would change history, the hall fell into complete silence. "I choose Princess Silara as my bride." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and even a few loud exclamations of disbelief spread through the hall. Some Zyrexians laughed, assuming it was a joke. Others scowled, insulted by the mere suggestion. Silara, however, just stared at Elias, unblinking. The Empress slowly raised a hand, and the noise died instantly. She turned her cold gaze toward Elias, as if evaluating whether he had lost his mind. "You are certain of your choice, human." Her voice was deep and commanding, filled with the weight of countless wars. Elias stood tall, despite the overwhelming presence of alien warriors around him. "Yes, I choose her." Silara finally spoke. Her voice was sharp, like a blade cutting through air. "You chose me?" She took a step forward, towering over Elias. The air around her seemed to hum with restrained power. "Do you even understand what you are saying, human?" she asked, her golden eyes narrowing. "I am not a fragile creature. I am not some soft diplomat looking for peace. I am Silara, daughter of the Empress, blood of the conquerors. Do you think a human can stand beside me?" Elias held her gaze, refusing to back down. "I know exactly what I'm saying." Silara studied him, searching for weakness, for hesitation. She found none. For the first time in her life, she felt something strange, uncertainty. The Empress watched the exchange with mild amusement. "This is unprecedented. No human has ever sought the hand of a Zyrexian royal." She leaned forward. "Tell me, Captain Voss, why should I allow this union?" Elias knew this was the moment that mattered most. His next words would decide the fate of Earth's relationship with the Zyrexian Empire. "With respect, Empress, this is not just about a marriage. This is about an alliance. Humans are not the strongest species, nor the most advanced. But we are resilient. We survive, we adapt, and we refuse to give up, no matter the odds." He turned back to Silara. "And that's why I chose you. You are the strongest of your people, not just in battle, but in spirit. If humanity is to have a future among the stars, we need to stand beside those who are unbreakable." Silara's expression remained unreadable, but the hall was filled with whispers. The Empress tapped a finger on her throne, deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "Very well. You have chosen, but choice alone is not enough." She lifted her chin, her silver eyes gleaming. "If you truly wish to stand beside my daughter, you must prove your worth." Elias felt his heart rate quicken, but he forced himself to remain calm. "What must I do?" Silara crossed her arms, her sharp teeth showing in a smirk. "The trials of worth." The murmurs in the hall grew louder. Some nobles looked intrigued, others shook their heads in amusement. The trials were brutal, designed to test the strongest warriors of the Empire. No human had ever attempted them. The Empress nodded. "If you pass the trials, you will earn the right to stand beside my daughter. If you fail, you will leave in shame, and Earth's request for an alliance will be denied." Elias exhaled slowly, then looked directly at Silara. "Then I accept." For the first time, Princess Silara laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, but it held something more than amusement, curiosity. "You are either very brave," she said, her golden eyes watching him like a predator watching its prey, "or very foolish." Elias smiled. "Maybe a little of both." The Empress raised her hand once more. "Then it is decided. The trials will begin at dawn." The hall erupted into chaos again. Some Zyrexians cheered, eager to see the human fail. Others whispered, wondering if Elias might surprise them all. Silara, however, simply looked at him, her disbelief slowly turning into something else. Interest. And for the first time in her life, she wondered, could a human truly stand beside her? At the break of dawn, Captain Elias Voss stood before the massive stone archway that led to the arena. The early light painted long shadows across the palace courtyard, and a cool breeze carried the scent of fresh dew and ancient stone. Today was the day he would prove that a human's strength was not measured by brute force alone, but by a clever and determined heart. Inside the arena, the floor was rough and uneven, marked with the scars of past battles. High stone walls enclosed the circular space, and above, the sky peeked through small openings in the roof. Hundreds of Zyrexian onlookers sat on raised platforms, their eyes fixed on the center. They had gathered not only to witness a trial, but to see if a human could stand against the might of a specially bred warbeast. For years, the legends had told of this fearsome creature, a genetically enhanced warbeast designed to test the spirit and skill of a warrior. As the large, heavy door at one end of the arena slowly swung open, the beast made its entrance. It was a towering animal with thick, dark fur and burning red eyes that seemed to hold both pain and fury. Every step it took sent a tremor through the ground, and its powerful limbs moved with surprising speed despite its massive size. Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward into the center of the arena. His heart pounded, yet his eyes were calm and focused. He recalled the careful study he had made of the creature's habits during his training. Although the warbeast was built for strength, it was not known for its quick thinking. That was his chance. The announcer's deep voice echoed through the arena as he declared the start of the trial. With no warning, the warbeast roared and charged directly at Elias. The creature's sharp claws sliced through the air as it aimed to strike him down. Elias did not panic. Instead, he swiftly sidestepped, allowing the beast's momentum to carry it past him. The crowd gasped as the great creature nearly trampled a large stone pillar. Realizing that its raw power alone would not bring the human down, the warbeast circled Elias, seeking another chance to attack. Elias kept his eyes on the creature and scanned the arena. He noticed that the floor was not even everywhere. Patches of loose stone could prove to be an advantage. Trusting his instincts, he led the beast toward a narrow passage between two heavy stone columns. In the cramped space, the warbeast's large body had difficulty turning quickly. Its heavy steps became more labored as it tried to chase him in the tight corridor. Elias used every bit of his training. He darted from one side to the other, letting the beast's bulk work against it. Every time the creature lunged, he avoided its claws with agile steps and calm determination. The clash of its rage and his clever moves filled the arena with a steady rhythm of suspense. At one moment, the warbeast charged again with a thundering roar. Elias saw a brief opening. With careful precision, he moved behind the creature and raised his short spear, a simple yet trusted weapon. The spear struck the beast on its side. A low groan of pain emerged from the warbeast as it staggered. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat before erupting into cheers. Every onlooker could see that this human was not only brave, but also wise in his approach. The injured warbeast slowed down and began to lose its fierce momentum. It stepped back and roared once more, though its attacks were now less focused. Elias watched every move with a clear mind. He led the wounded creature toward one of the arena's stone walls. There, with the beast trapped and its energy waning, Elias carefully positioned himself. The war beast thrashed against the wall, but the confined space left it little room to maneuver. For a long, tense moment, the arena was silent. Elias and the beast faced each other, the warrior with calm resolve, and the creature with wild, pained eyes. Slowly, the beast's anger began to fade, and exhaustion took over. Finally, it sat down heavily on the rough ground, its breathing coming in slow, deep pants. It was not dead, but it had been subdued by the human's careful planning and quick reflexes. As the sound of clapping and cheering spread throughout the arena, Captain Elias Voss stepped away from the center. He did not raise his weapon further. He had proven his worth without needless harm. The applause was not for a savage victory, but for a battle won by a mix of mind and body, a clear sign that even a human could be as resourceful and determined as any Zyrexian warrior. Walking out of the arena, Elias felt both relief and a deep sense of accomplishment. He had met the first challenge with courage and skill. In every step, he took down the stone corridors of the palace. He carried with him the respect of the Zyrexian onlookers. He also felt the weight of the trials still ahead. Today's victory was but the beginning of a journey that would test him in many more ways. From a high balcony, the Empress watched silently, her gaze hard to read. Beside her, Princess Silera looked on with a mix of curiosity and growing respect. Though she had begun the day with disbelief, now she saw in Elias the spirit of a true warrior, one who did not rely solely on strength, but also on wisdom and determination. For Captain Elias Voss, the battle with the war beast was a step toward proving that humanity's strength lay in its resilience and resourcefulness. The cheers of the crowd, the nods of respect from the Zyrexian warriors, and even the measured gaze of the royal family all spoke of one clear truth: a human could rise to any challenge when driven by hope and purpose. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light on the ancient stones of the palace, Elias prepared himself for what was yet to come. The trials of worth were a series of tests meant to reveal the true heart of a warrior. And with each step, each careful move, Captain Elias Voss showed that his heart was full of courage, determination, and a hope that would carry him forward into an uncertain but promising future. The day had just begun, and with it came new challenges and new battles. Yet in that moment, as he walked away from the arena with quiet pride, Captain Elias Voss knew that this victory was only the first of many. In the vast, unpredictable world of the Zyrexian Empire, he was ready to prove that even the humblest human could shine like a beacon of hope among the stars. The evening sun cast long shadows across the palace training grounds. The air was thick with anticipation. Captain Elias Voss stood in the center of the dueling ring, his posture calm but alert. Surrounding him were rows of Zyrexian warriors, their golden eyes watching him with both amusement and curiosity. This was the second trial, the duel of honor. Elias had proven himself against the war beast, but that had been a test of strategy and survival. This was different. Now he had to face a Zyrexian warrior in single combat. Across from him, his opponent stepped forward. Commander Valric, a towering Zyrexian soldier, nearly 9 feet tall, and built like a living mountain. His deep red armor gleamed in the fading sunlight, and the massive energy sword strapped to his back hummed softly as he pulled it free. Valric smirked down at Elias. "A human warrior. I almost feel sorry for you," he said, his voice deep and confident. The crowd laughed, nodding in agreement. Elias, however, remained unfazed. He had expected this reaction. He had faced opponents who underestimated him before, but strength alone did not decide the outcome of a battle. Skill, speed, and intelligence did. Princess Silera sat nearby on an elevated platform, arms crossed, her golden eyes locked onto Elias. She had been skeptical of him since the beginning, but now she was curious. The human had surprised her once. Could he do it again? The Empress raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent. Her voice carried across the dueling ground. This duel will test your worth as a warrior, Captain Voss. The fight continues until one yields or is unable to continue. If you wish to stand beside my daughter, you must prove yourself here. Elias gave a small nod. Understood. Valric grinned. Try to last more than a minute, human. Elias didn't respond. He simply prepared. The Empress lowered her hand. The duel began. The fight begins. Valric moved first, swinging his energy sword in a powerful downward arc. The weapon crackled with energy, slicing through the air with deadly speed. Elias rolled to the side just in time, avoiding the strike. The blade slammed into the ground, sending sparks flying. The crowd gasped. The human had dodged the first strike. Valric smirked. You're fast, but let's see how long that lasts. He lunged forward with terrifying speed, his blade flashing toward Elias. But the human warrior was not there. Elias sidestepped, ducked, and weaved, narrowly avoiding each blow. He never stayed in one place for too long, forcing Valric to keep adjusting. Elias knew he couldn't match Valric in raw power. If he tried to block an attack directly, he would be crushed. But strength meant nothing if it couldn't land a hit. The crowd murmured as they watched. The human wasn't fighting like a Zyrexian. He wasn't trying to overpower his opponent. He was using speed, precision, and patience. Then, Elias struck. As Valric swung wide, Elias stepped inside the attack and slammed his elbow into the Zyrexian's side. The impact was small compared to Valric's size, but it was unexpected. Valric stumbled slightly. The crowd let out a surprised murmur. He landed a hit. Silura raised an eyebrow. Interesting, she muttered. Valric's grin faded. Enough of this game. The Zyrexian warrior charged, his blade sweeping in a deadly arc. Elias barely ducked in time, feeling the heat of the energy sword passing inches above his head. He leaped backward, putting distance between them. But Valric had changed his strategy. Instead of relying on raw strength, he adjusted, predicting Elias's movements. The next swing forced Elias into a corner of the ring. Trapped. The crowd roared, thinking it was over. Valric lifted his blade for the final strike. Elias acted fast. He dropped to the ground, rolled under Valric's legs, and came up behind him. Before Valric could turn, Elias spun and delivered a precise kick to the back of his knee. The Zyrexian staggered forward, momentarily losing balance. Elias seized the moment. He stepped forward, placing the tip of his own training sword against Valric's neck. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Valric froze. His breathing was heavy, his expression shocked. The human had won. Victory and respect. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Valric let out a deep laugh. Well played, Captain, he admitted. Then, to everyone's shock, he bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. The arena erupted into cheers. Elias stepped back, lowering his blade. He wasn't arrogant about his victory. He simply gave a respectful nod in return. Up on the platform, the Empress watched with an unreadable expression. Then she turned to her daughter. What do you think now, Silura? The princess didn't answer immediately. Her golden eyes were locked onto Elias, a thoughtful expression on her face. Finally, she spoke. He's not just brave. He's smart. The Empress smiled slightly. Then the trials continue. Elias exhaled, allowing himself a moment of relief. He had survived the second trial, but he knew there were more ahead. As he turned to leave the ring, he caught a glimpse of Silura watching him. For the first time since they met, she didn't look at him with disbelief. She looked at him with interest. And that, he knew, was the greatest victory of all. The echoes of the cheering crowd still lingered in the air as Captain Elias Voss stepped out of the dueling ring. His muscles ached from the battle, but he forced himself to stand tall. He had won the duel against Commander Valric, but he knew this was just another step in proving himself. The Empress of Xerxia sat on her high throne, her golden eyes watching Elias carefully. She was not an easy ruler to impress, and though Elias had passed 2 trials, she remained unreadable. Standing beside her was Princess Silara. Unlike before, her expression was no longer filled with disbelief or doubt. Instead, there was something new: curiosity. Elias exhaled. What now? The Empress speaks. The Empress raised her hand, and the arena fell silent. Her voice, clear and strong, echoed through the vast Colosseum. Captain Elias Voss, you have shown strength and intelligence. You have won against the war beast of Khazur. You have survived the gauntlet of blades. And now you have bested one of our finest warriors in single combat. A murmur spread through the crowd. The human had done what many Xerxians could not. But a warrior's skill alone does not make one worthy of standing beside royalty. The Empress continued. There is more to leadership than battle. There is more to strength than war. Elias kept his expression neutral, though he felt a flicker of unease. What was coming next? The Empress turned to Silara. My daughter, what do you say? Does this human deserve to continue? All eyes turned to Princess Silara. She stepped forward, her gaze locked onto Elias. You fight well, Captain, she said, her voice calm. You are clever, and you do not back down. But, she paused, tilting her head slightly. Do you understand what it means to be a part of this empire? Elias met her gaze steadily. I understand that strength is not just about battle. Leadership is about knowing when to fight, when to talk, and when to listen. A small smile touched Silara's lips. She turned to the Empress. I believe he has earned the right to continue the trials. The Empress studied her daughter, then nodded. Very well, she said. Then let us see if he can survive the trial of mind. The trial of mind. Elias found himself led into the grand palace, deeper into the halls of the Xerxian high chamber. This was no battlefield. There were no weapons, no enemies, no roaring crowds. Instead, he stood before a massive table surrounded by Xerxian officials, scholars, and commanders. Silara took a seat at the head of the table, her posture poised. She gestured for Elias to sit across from her. This, she said, is a test of wisdom, strategy, and diplomacy. Our empire does not rule through war alone. It rules through knowledge, alliances, and decisions. Elias nodded. And how do I prove myself here? The high scholar, an older Xerxian with deep violet robes, spoke. We will give you 3 challenges, scenarios that require logic, strategy, and diplomacy. Solve them, and you prove yourself not only a warrior but a leader. Elias took a deep breath. This was his real battlefield now. First challenge. The broken treaty. The first scholar leaned forward. 2 Xerxian colonies are on the verge of war. One accuses the other of breaking an important treaty. If war begins, millions could die. What do you do? Elias thought for a moment. First, I would investigate. Treaties have terms. If one side truly broke it, there must be evidence. But if the treaty was misunderstood, I would use diplomacy to redefine the agreement, preventing war without weakening either side. The scholar nodded slowly. Interesting. Silara's eyes flickered with approval. Second challenge. The starving planet. The next official spoke. A distant Xerxian colony is running out of food. They request urgent supplies, but doing so would weaken the empire's core food supply. If we do not help, the colony may fall into rebellion. What do you do? Elias considered. Relying on one source is a weakness. I would find alternative solutions. Trade with other species, invest in local farming, or improve transport efficiency. That way, we help without weakening ourselves. The officials exchanged glances. Silara nodded slightly. Final challenge. The impossible decision. The High Scholar leaned forward. A fleet of enemy warships approaches. They demand you surrender, or they will attack a civilian planet. You have two options: fight and risk millions of innocent lives, or surrender and let the Empire fall. What do you do? The room fell silent. Elias clenched his jaw. A no-win scenario. Then, slowly, he spoke. I refuse to accept only two options. I would create a third. I would stall for time through diplomacy, while secretly preparing a counterattack. I would use deception, negotiation, and force, but never let them choose the terms of my surrender. The High Scholar leaned back, surprised. Silara's eyes shone with something unreadable. The Empress herself, watching from the shadows, gave the smallest nod. A worthy contender. The officials murmured among themselves. Finally, the High Scholar turned to the Empress. He has answered well, Your Majesty. The Empress stood, her presence commanding. Captain Elias Voss, you have proven yourself as a warrior. Now you have proven yourself as a thinker and a leader. She paused, but there is one final trial ahead. Elias straightened. I'm ready. The Empress's lips curled into a knowing smile. Let us see, she said, for the final trial will be a test of the heart. Elias frowned slightly. A test of the heart. What did that mean? As he turned, he caught Princess Silara's gaze. For the first time, she was looking at him not with doubt, but with something else. Something far more dangerous. Interest. Captain Elias Voss stood in the Grand Palace Hall, his mind still processing the Empress's words. A test of the heart. He had expected trials of strength, intelligence, and strategy. But this, what did it even mean? The Empress remained seated on her throne, her golden eyes watching him carefully. Around her, Zyrexian nobles and officials whispered among themselves. Princess Silara, standing beside her mother, had an unreadable expression. Finally, the Empress spoke. You have proven yourself as a warrior and a leader, she said. But now we must see if you are worthy in a different way. Strength and wisdom mean nothing if the heart is weak. Elias kept his expression steady. What must I do? The Empress gestured to Silara. For this final trial, you will spend time with the princess. No battles, no strategy. Just you and her as companions. A ruler must understand not only war, but also people. A warrior must understand not only how to fight, but also why they fight. The words settled over the room. The test was simple, but also the most difficult. Silara's gaze met Elias's. He could tell she wasn't entirely sure about this either. But after a moment, she nodded. Very well, she said. Let's see what kind of man you really are, Captain. An unusual challenge. The next morning, Elias was escorted to the royal gardens, where Silara was waiting. The gardens were vast, filled with towering silver-leaf trees and glowing blue flowers. Strange, alien birds with shimmering wings fluttered through the air. Silara stood near a small fountain, her arms crossed. She was dressed in a lighter outfit than usual, her warrior's armor replaced with a flowing royal robe. Despite this, she still carried herself with the confidence of a fighter. You look uncomfortable, Silara observed. Elias gave a small shrug. I'm used to battlefields, not gardens. Silara smirked. Then maybe it's time you learn that not all victories come through war. She turned and began walking. Elias followed. For a while, they walked in silence. It wasn't an awkward silence, just two warriors who weren't sure what to say. Finally, Silara spoke. Why did you fight so hard for this? She asked. Why did you choose to go through these trials? Elias thought for a moment before answering. At first, it was about survival. But then, I realized something. Humans are often seen as weak by the galaxy. We're smaller, physically weaker than most. But we're survivors. We adapt. We fight for what we believe in. Silara studied him. And what do you believe in? Elias met her gaze. That people are more than their reputation. that warriors can be more than weapons, and that maybe alliances are built through understanding, not just power. A flicker of something crossed Silara's face, respect, maybe even admiration. A moment of trust. As they continued walking, they came across a small training ground hidden within the garden. There were wooden sparring swords lined up along a rack. Silara glanced at Elias. Since you're uncomfortable in gardens, maybe a fight will make you feel better. Elias grinned. You want to spar? Silara picked up 2 wooden swords and tossed one to him. I want to see how good you are without an audience. Elias caught the sword and took a stance. All right. No holding back, princess. Silara smirked. I never do. They clashed, their wooden swords meeting in a quick exchange of blows. Silara was fast, faster than Elias expected, but he was used to adapting. He dodged, countered, and struck back. The fight was evenly matched, and for the first time, they weren't fighting as competitors, but as equals. At one point, Silara nearly tripped over a stone in the grass. Instinctively, Elias reached out and caught her wrist, steadying her before she fell. For a moment, they stood close, closer than either of them had expected. Silara's golden eyes met his, and for the first time, Elias saw something other than skepticism in them. Surprise, respect, and maybe something else. She quickly pulled back, clearing her throat. You're not bad, Captain, she said, recovering her usual confidence. Elias chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. An unexpected bond. Over the next few days, Elias and Silara spent more time together. They talked, they argued, they laughed. Elias learned that Silara wasn't just a warrior. She was also a strategist, a scholar, and a leader who cared deeply for her people. And Silara learned that Elias wasn't just a soldier. He was someone who thought before he fought, someone who valued life over war. One evening, as they sat on a balcony overlooking the city, Silara spoke softly. You are not what I expected, Elias. He turned to her. And what did you expect? She smiled slightly. Someone who only knew how to fight. Someone who only wanted to prove himself. But you're different. Elias hesitated before speaking. So are you. A moment of silence passed between them. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else entirely. Then suddenly, the sound of footsteps broke the moment. A royal guard approached. Princess, Captain, the Empress has summoned you both. Silara stood. It's time. Elias took a deep breath. This was the final moment. Had he passed the test? A final judgment. Back in the throne room, the Empress watched them carefully. You have spent time together, she said. Now, I ask my daughter, what is your judgment? Silara took a deep breath before speaking. Captain Elias Voss is not just a warrior. He is not just a strategist. He is someone who fights with more than his sword. He fights with his mind, his heart, and his loyalty. She turned to Elias, and I believe he has proven himself worthy. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, the Empress smiled. Then the trials are complete, she declared. Captain Elias Voss, you have earned your place among us. Elias exhaled. He had done it. But as he looked at Silara, he realized something else. This was not just about proving himself. Somewhere along the way, something had changed. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't fighting just for honor anymore. Captain Elias Voss stood tall in the grand throne room, hearing the Empress's final declaration. Captain Elias Voss, you have earned your place among us. The words carried weight. They signified the end of his trials, his acceptance among the Zyrexians. But as the cheers echoed around the chamber, Elias couldn't help but feel that this wasn't just about victory. Something else had changed. His gaze shifted toward Princess Silara. She was watching him with an expression he had never seen before, one that was neither skepticism nor mere respect. It was something deeper. But before he could process it, the Empress raised her hand, calling for silence. There remains one final decision, she said. Captain Elias Voss has proven himself worthy of our empire, but does he accept what comes next? The chamber grew quiet. Elias frowned slightly. What do you mean? The Empress looked at him, her golden eyes sharp. You have earned the right to stand at my daughter's side. The alliance will be honored if you accept the proposal, but the final choice is yours. A heavy silence followed. This was it. Silara's expression was unreadable now. She had been against this arrangement from the beginning. And yet, she had defended him. She had stood by him. Elias looked around. The Zyrexians were waiting. The future of a powerful alliance hung on his answer. He took a deep breath. A warrior's heart. Elias turned to face Silara. This was never just about a political bond, was it? Silara crossed her arms. You tell me, Captain. He exhaled, shaking his head with a small smile. You're impossible to read. She smirked. That's the idea. Elias looked directly into her eyes. I don't believe in alliances built on duty alone. If I stay, I don't want it to be just because of honor or obligation. Silara studied him carefully. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped forward, lowering her voice so that only he could hear. This was never just about duty, she admitted. Not anymore. Elias felt his heartbeat quicken slightly. This was real. His decision wasn't just about an empire. It was about her. A sudden attack. Before Elias could speak, the sound of a massive explosion rocked the palace. The ground trembled beneath them. Cries of alarm filled the air as guards drew their weapons. What was that? Elias shouted. A royal officer rushed into the room. Your Majesty, the Kelaz Dominion has launched an attack. Their fleet has bypassed the outer defenses. The Empress's expression darkened. They dare strike now. Silara clenched her fists. They must have been waiting for the trials to end, hoping we would be distracted. Another explosion thundered outside. The palace lights flickered. Elias turned toward Silara. Do they want war? They want our throne, our empire. And they don't care how much blood they spill to get it, she growled. Elias's training kicked in. Where's your fleet positioned? Too far, Silara said. Most of our forces are guarding the outer systems. The city is vulnerable. Elias's mind raced. The Zyrexians were mighty warriors, but the Kelaz were ruthless. If their fleet had breached the capital's defenses, there was no time to wait for reinforcements. The Empress turned to them. You must go. The people will need a leader on the battlefield. Silara nodded sharply. I'll lead the ground forces. Elias stepped forward. I'll go with you. Silara blinked in surprise. You don't have to. The trials are over. Elias gave a small smirk. I thought you said strength isn't just about battle. It's about why we fight. Silara stared at him for a moment. Then, without another word, she grabbed her sword and nodded. Battle for the Empire. The city was in chaos. Kelaz soldiers, tall and armored in dark red plating, had landed in the streets, attacking civilians and royal guards alike. Energy blasts lit up the night sky as Zyrexian warriors fought back fiercely. Silara and Elias sprinted toward the front lines, leading a unit of soldiers. We need to push them back before their reinforcements arrive, Silara said. Elias nodded. I'll take a strike team and cut off their command structure. If we take out their leader, the attack will collapse. Silara smirked. Not a bad plan, Captain. Elias grinned. Told you I'm more than just a fighter. They split up. Silara charged into the battle, leading the Zyrexian warriors with precision. Elias, along with a handful of elite soldiers, infiltrated the enemy lines. The fight was brutal. The Kelaz were stronger physically, but they lacked Elias's tactical mind. He used speed, deception, and well-placed attacks to dismantle their ranks. Soon, he spotted the Kelaz commander, a towering brute giving orders near the city's central power core. Elias didn't hesitate. He leaped forward, engaging the enemy leader in battle. The callous commander was powerful, but Elias had faced worse. He dodged, countered, and struck with precision. Finally, with a swift, decisive strike, Elias brought the commander down. The callous forces hesitated. Their leader was gone. Their attack had failed. Victory and a new beginning. By the time the battle ended, the callous forces had retreated. The city was safe. Elias stood amidst the ruins, catching his breath. Around him, the Zyrexian soldiers cheered. The battle was over. Silara approached, wiping blood from her cheek. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Elias smirked. "Guess I'm just stubborn." Silara studied him. "You fought for us. You fought for me." Elias met her gaze. "I told you, I don't fight for duty. I fight for what I believe in." Silara's expression softened. "And what do you believe in now?" Elias hesitated for only a moment. Then he smiled. "I believe I belong here." The Empress, watching from the palace balcony, gave a small approving nod. The trials had tested him, but the battle had proven him. He was no longer just a human warrior. He was one of them. And as Silara gave him a rare, genuine smile, Elias knew this was just the beginning. The battle was over. The city stood victorious, but the scars of war remained. Captain Elias Voss walked through the ruined streets, watching Zyrexian warriors help their wounded and rebuild their homes. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the scent of burned metal mixed with the fresh scent of the alien flora. The people whispered as he passed. The human, a warrior, a hero. Elias had fought alongside them, bled with them, and saved their empire from destruction. But was he truly one of them? His gaze drifted to Princess Silara. She stood atop the palace steps, directing the soldiers and ensuring the wounded were tended to. Even after the battle, she remained strong, determined, unstoppable. As if sensing his stare, she turned, her golden eyes meeting his. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she walked toward him. "A warrior's reward." "You did well, Captain," Silara said, her voice softer than usual. Elias smirked. "Only well. I was hoping for legendary." Silara crossed her arms. "Saving an empire is impressive, but you still have much to learn." Elias chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." She studied him for a moment, then looked at the city. "The people will remember this day. They will remember your name." Elias sighed, looking at the ruins. "I didn't do it for glory. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Silara nodded. "That is why you are worthy." Before Elias could respond, the Empress arrived. She stood tall, her golden robes flowing in the soft wind. The entire city turned their eyes to her. "People of Zyrexia," she spoke, her voice carrying across the city. "Tonight, we honor a warrior, not of our blood, but of our heart. Captain Elias Voss has proven himself beyond question." A thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd. The Empress turned to Elias. "The trials were meant to test not just your skill, but your spirit. You have passed every test, and more." Elias bowed slightly. It was an honor to fight for Zyrexia. The Empress smiled. "Then it is time for the final step. The alliance stands strong. And now, the princess must decide." Elias turned toward Silara. This was her choice now. The moment stretched between them. Would she accept him, not just as a warrior, but as something more? The princess's choice. Silara took a deep breath. Her expression was unreadable, but her golden eyes never left Elias. "From the moment you arrived, I doubted you," she admitted. "I thought you were just another human trying to prove something." Elias smirked. "Not entirely wrong." Silara continued, her voice softer. "But I was wrong about what you were trying to prove. You didn't fight for yourself. You fought for us. For my people. For me." She stepped closer, so only he could hear her next words. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as an outsider. Elias felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't expected. The princess turned to the Empress. Captain Elias Voss has earned more than our respect. He has earned his place among us. Another roar of approval echoed from the crowd. The Empress smiled. Then the bond is sealed. Elias blinked. Wait, does this mean? Silura smirked. Yes, Captain. You chose me, but now I choose you. For the first time in his life, Elias was speechless. A new beginning. Later that night, as the celebrations filled the city, Elias and Silura stood on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. You never answered my question, Elias said. Silura raised an eyebrow. Which one? Did you really want this alliance, or did you just go along with it because of duty? Silura was quiet for a moment. Then she smirked. At first, it was duty. Elias sighed dramatically. That hurts. Silura chuckled. But then I saw who you really are. And now, it's something more. Elias looked at her. Something more. She met his gaze. Stay, Elias. Be more than just a warrior. Be one of us. Elias smiled. I wasn't planning on leaving. For the first time, Silura truly smiled. The stars above burned bright. The war was over, but a new journey had begun. Elias had found something greater than victory. He had found his place. And maybe, just maybe, he had found her.